Hey guys, Numbers here with another Wheel of Fortune video, and this time I want to talk about the mystery wedge.
Wow.
For those of you who aren't real familiar with the show, the way the mystery wedge works is, when you land on it you call a consonant. If your letter's up there, then you have the option to play the mystery wedge as a vanilla $1,000 space. For example, if you guess H and there's 3 H's in the puzzle, then you can just take the $3,000. Alternatively, the player can pass up that $3,000 and flip the mystery wedge for a 50-50 chance at $10,000 or a bankrupt. So, now that we know how the mystery wedge works, when should we play it safe and when should we flip the mystery wedge? To find out, I decided to run the numbers. We can start our calculation by considering what would happen if we solve the puzzle immediately after deciding what to do with the mystery wedge. For example, this spreadsheet is telling us that if we start the turn with $0, land on the mystery wedge and guess a letter that's on the puzzle once, we can take the $1,000, or we can flip the mystery wedge and end up with either $10,000 or $0 if it's a bankrupt, with the average being 5,000. In this case, the difference between flipping and not flipping the mystery wedge turns out to be $4,000. Furthermore, we can see that you figure to make more money flipping the mystery wedge all the way up until a starting amount of $8,000. Now this may seem high, but remember, all this is saying is that if you have 8,000, you can take the 1,000 and go to 9,000, or you can go for a 50-50 chance of 18,000. With the average outcome being 9,000. So the major takeaway from this is that if you're not going to be doing any spinning, flipping the mystery wedge is pretty cool. And one final thing, this $8,000 cutoff goes to $6,000 if you guessed a double letter, $4,000 if you guessed a triple letter, and $2,000 for a quadruple letter. It's just $2,000 less for each additional letter because you're having to pass up on an extra 1,000 each time you add another letter. So that's everything you need to know about cases where spinning is not a factor. But what happens when we introduce the implications of future spins? At this point, you might be wondering, why would it matter whether or not we're going to keep spinning after we decide what to do with the mystery wedge? And the answer to this basically comes down to the fact that spinning gets worse for the player the more money they have. If you only have $1,000, then there's a lot of incentive to continue spinning in order to build up cash and prizes. However, if you have $10,000, then the liability of hitting a bankrupt can outweigh the benefits of potentially accumulating even more money. So the net result of this is that if we plan on spinning the wheel several times either way, then we figure to make a lot more than $1,000 over the course of the puzzle by not flipping the mystery wedge, and perhaps a bit less than $5,000 by flipping the mystery wedge. So now that we understand some of the principles that are at play here, let's look at some specific examples from the show. In this situation, the player's got $250, they spin the wheel, and they land on the mystery wedge. They guess an H, there's 3 of them in the puzzle, and now they have to decide what they're going to do with the mystery wedge. So should the player flip the mystery wedge or not? The first consideration is the immediate value, and we can see that he's risking $3,000 for a 50-50 chance at winning $10,000. By that math, the player is better off flipping the mystery wedge by almost $2,000. However, we know that this isn't the whole story. It's still fairly early in the puzzle, and the player probably isn't particularly close to solving it. As a result, the player stands to lose more than $3,000 in flipping the mystery wedge, and they probably stand to gain a little less than you'd think in flipping the mystery wedge. To get a rough idea of how these effects would play out, I went ahead and made another spreadsheet. However, I'm not going to worry about trying to explain all the stuff that's going on here. Let's just get to the conclusions. Here we have graphed the expected value of flipping the mystery wedge in blue and not flipping the mystery wedge in red. And the graph looks pretty much how we would expect it to. We have the flip option slowly hemorrhaging value, with the exception of this little windfall here where the player guessed a quadruple letter, and then more hemorrhaging. And on the other hand, the no flip option continues to increase in expected value as the player accumulates more cash and prizes. That is, until the no flip option gets to such a point that it too starts hemorrhaging value as the risk of bankrupting begins to outweigh the benefits of accumulating even more prizes. Finally, we can see that the two options cross paths after the third spin. Normally, this would mean that if you can solve the puzzle within the first 3 spins, you're better off flipping the mystery wedge. However, depending on how you happened to sequence your letters, you would end up missing out on this juicy windfall here. So for this specific puzzle, you're pretty much always going to be best off by not flipping the mystery wedge. So the last puzzle was pretty much the perfect example of a situation where not flipping the mystery wedge is almost for sure going to be better. You had a big puzzle with lots of double and triple letters to accumulate value with. The player was nowhere near solving the puzzle, and the player guessed a triple letter when they did land on the mystery wedge. In this puzzle, we've got a similar situation, but there are some important details that make the decision a lot closer than the last puzzle. This time the player hits the mystery wedge with the first spin of the puzzle, and they pick up a single letter. Immediately we can see that this is a pretty big difference from the last puzzle. In the immediate sense, we're $4,000 better off flipping the mystery wedge, whereas in the last puzzle it was a little under $2,000 difference. Another important difference is the size of the puzzle, and we can see that this puzzle is a little bit smaller than the last puzzle in terms of the number of letters on the board. If you're going to be spinning several times, you want to have the puzzle be as big as possible to maximize the chance of the juicy double and triple letters. Finally, with this puzzle, like the last one, the player figures to have to spin the wheel several times before getting enough information to be able to solve the puzzle, and this will favor not flipping the mystery wedge. So with these factors in mind, let's see what the spreadsheet says. Once again, we have the expected value of flipping and not flipping graphed together, and we can see that the shape of the graph is somewhat similar to the previous one. You have kind of the same idea going on here as with here. However, we can see that the difference between flipping and not flipping starts off being quite a bit bigger. That's largely due to the fact that a single letter was guessed rather than a triple letter here. Another thing you'll notice is that the growth rate is a little more steady here. We don't have any juicy windfalls like this, except for all the way at the end there was this triple letter. So the net result of all of this is that flipping the mystery wedge is a much more viable option in this puzzle than in the last one. And we can see that for the first 5 spins, the player is better off flipping the mystery wedge than not, so if you're a good puzzle solver, I would say go ahead and flip the mystery wedge. However, in the actual show, the players didn't solve the puzzle until all of the consonants had been guessed, and I would expect most players to end up in this 5 to 7 spins area anyways, so I don't think the flip or no flip decision here makes a huge amount of difference either way. In the previous 2 examples, we looked at situations where the player was a long ways away from solving the puzzle. This time, however, we're going to be looking at a situation where the player presumably knows what the puzzle is by the time they land on the mystery wedge. So in this situation, the player has $1,500, the trip is off the board, and the puzzle is William Tell Me a Bedtime Story. So there's 1 quadruple letter and 3 single letters that are left on the board. Okay, so how are we going to play this? Maybe the most obvious line is what the player did. They guessed the quadruple L and just took the $4,000 to end with $5,500. Now if we go to our immediate value spreadsheet, we can see that if the player was planning on solving the puzzle right away either way, then they could have picked up an extra $250 of value by flipping the mystery wedge. However, in this situation, there is an even better play that was available. The player could have guessed a single letter when they landed on the mystery wedge, a B, a D, or a W, flipped the mystery wedge, and then spun one more time for that juicy quadruple letter. This line would have netted the player an average of about $6,300, which is only a modest improvement over the $5,500 that the player actually got. However, I still like this example because it really demonstrates a lot of what we've learned about when we should flip the mystery wedge and when we shouldn't. We have a puzzle where the player can solve it whenever they want, so they're not going to have to worry about flipping the mystery wedge, only to lose the $10K to a bankrupt later on. The player also started with just $1,500, so there's not much risk there, and the player had the possibility of guessing a single letter that turn. The only reason why flipping the mystery wedge wasn't a slam dunk here was because the player had the possibility to make $4,000 by playing the mystery wedge as a vanilla 1000 space. And it's because of this good alternative that the flip the mystery wedge play only netted an extra $700 of value. But overall, this situation had all of the other things that you look for in a spot to flip the mystery wedge. So now you know some of the things to look for when you're deciding when to flip the mystery wedge and when not to. That's going to be all for this episode of Wheel of Fortune by the Numbers. If you think I made any major mistakes, go ahead and point those out in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching and have a nice day.